All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope you don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board for the board. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 170 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill, and I am joined by the usual gang, Lonnie, St. Louis Kiss, 69th Blizzard Ken, and Marcus Almighty Mark. Gentlemen, good to see you again. Thank you for giving us your time to put a podcast together. It's appreciated by me and hopefully by all of our listeners, and especially Mr. Thumbs Down.
That's right. Whoever that is.
Every week, nearly like clockwork.
He is not happy with us.
He does not like it. I think it's personal.
We are sideways with that guy.
Yeah. All right. Since we're not ever going to make friends with him, that's perfectly all right. Let me just turn off my Dropbox so it doesn't start syncing in the middle of trying to record. It's the little things. Yeah. Today's episode, we've thrown a couple of extra episodes out in the last week. Daniel came to visit and have a drink or six. That was a trip, Daniel. I do like it when we get you on the show, but that was absolutely wild. Today, though, we're going to talk about something a little bit more topical, and that is, it's the 40th anniversary of Double Platinum. Mm-hmm. I don't even have a LP left anymore. I think I unloaded all my vinyl copies. So, Ken, which one's that you have? Is that just standard, or is that out of the Kissteria box?
This is the, well, I have that too, but this is my original one that I bought. This is the second Kiss album I ever bought. First was Live 2. This was the second one. I still have this one.
Is that the one with the platinum certificate made out to you?
Yes, I wrote my name on the. I also did that for the Kiss Army card. I did that too back in '78. But yeah, there it is. But yeah, this is the album, the same album that I bought back in '78. And I have, of course, who knows, numerous reissues and whatnot of it too.
Yeah, so why don't you get us started on, the discussion is going to just be different aspects of this album. Start with your personal history. What led you to get that? Was it simply that it was the next release that came after Alive 2? And you're like, ooh, shiny thing, buy it, Kiss logo, gotta have it?
Yeah, so, I just got into Kiss in late 77 when Alive 2 came out. And, it was for me, it was the next logical step to discovering their back catalog of what happened before Alive 2. And from then, from this point, it was like a greatest hits. It's like a greatest hits, I guess you call it, right? Even though they're not necessarily hits. There's just the best of, right?
Yeah, because that intro to Rock Bottom sure was a chart burner, wasn't it? Had a couple of bullets on it.
Yeah. So it helped me go back and start then picking what albums I was going to buy next out of the first, 6 studio albums. So it was, it's a good starting point.
And I guess you were lucky with Alive 2 being your first album. There wasn't a tremendous amount of crossover between the two. I mean, yeah, there was,
right.
4 songs from Destroyer, 4 from Rock and Roll Over on it, but there was a good chunk of stuff off the first 3 albums that would have been completely new that hadn't been on Alive 2. So a good starting point. Mark, what about you? What was the first, or when did you first encounter Double Platinum, and what was the version that you purchased?
Well, the first time I ever encountered it was when I was living in the apartment buildings back in the younger times, and my older sister, who turns up a lot in these kind of stories because she's much older than me and she's the one who got me into Kiss to start with, but we went down to see her friends. He was babysitting me because both my parents were working back at those days, and she would drag me over to her friend's house, and couple of the guys that they knew came over, and they had this in their apartment, right? They had them on the wall. They had a copy on the wall that they would pin up on there, And then one of the guys was the one actually who clued me in on the whole thing of when he came up to me and said, "Hey kid, if you get a piece of paper and if you put it on top of the faces, you can take a pencil and rub it and you can get a picture of their faces." And I was like, "Oh wow, really?" I was like a young kid, right? So
what they look like.
I would sit there with my pencil and it would keep me occupied. I think that was their plan, to keep me occupied while my sister and them were doing their thing, right? So that was when I really first encountered it, and they would play that stuff all the time. Like you would hear it all the time in their apartment, and they were like a floor below us. So you would hear Kiss a lot. And when I ended up getting it was on CD when the 97 remasters came out. That was the first time I actually owned it. So it was this version actually is the first time I actually owned my own copy of it. And then I bought the vinyl when I started collecting my vinyl again. I never had the vinyl back in the day. I had a Live and all those other ones, but I never really got this because, funny enough, here in Canada, it's not too easy to find this album, especially where I am around. I mean, now it is, but back in the earlier times, I never recall seeing it anywhere around.
Lonnie, as a, I guess we have to call you a younger fan. When did you first run into this one and kind of? There you are. You're graying at the ears, and there we are. One of the younger fans.
This episode is just to show everyone why I always wear a hat. So, it's getting harder to call me a younger fan all the time. So, when I got double platinum fairly early on in my fandom, my brother and I, we had Destroyer, we had Creatures on audio cassette, and we had Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. We had Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits on cassette for Christmas one year. And then shortly after that, we got Love Gun. So we had a good sample. But shortly after that, we transitioned to CDs. And I think Double Platinum was the first Kiss album I got on CD. Like that Christmas, I think I got a CD player. And I got this. Will tell you the time frame. I got Poison's Flesh and Blood on CD that Christmas.
So did I.
And I also got Double Platinum that Christmas.
That was my first one.
At least you had one. At least you had one good present.
Exactly. I don't think I have one of them anymore. So so Double Platinum was cool because, and I remember going to the record store, and looking at the track listings. I'm like, oh, okay, I know Deuce, that's on Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, and I know Do You Love Me, that's on Destroyer. So I knew a decent chunk of the songs from the sampling of Kiss that I had my brother and I had between each other. So but it was one that was on but obviously if I got it for Christmas, it was one that was on my list because I knew some of the songs and I wanted to learn the rest of them because it was a greatest hits. And what do you do when you're trying to discover a band? That's what you did, especially in that time frame, is you bought the greatest hits to see what you liked, what you didn't like. Oh, is this worth exploring and getting more of just their album releases? Because if I don't like the greatest hits, why am I going to go spend money on a regular album? So I got the unremastered version of Double Platinum, and it was great. So like those songs, especially those versions, are the ones that I really related to for a long time because like Firehouse, that was my first time owning the song Firehouse. I didn't have the copy off of Live. I didn't have the copy off the original album because that's not on Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits or any of the other things that I had. So I just figured that the remix was just the standard mix of the song. And especially on Rock Bottom with the She intro, I didn't figure that out until I bought Alive. That's that was two mixed together type thing. So Double Platinum was early in my fandom and really got me going on their back catalog. And I think that's what a lot of fans in that time frame that picked up on Kiss in the 80s or early 90s probably had the same type of story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people with a very similar story. I mean, I never can remember particularly which one came after Asylum, obviously is my entry point. I think, I went for the one with the most songs on it. So it could have been Alive, it could have been double platinum, it could even have been Alive 2, which was, but it would have been one of the next ones that I bought simply because that was the way I thought as a fan. It would have been on cassette. It would have been purchased at Music City in Binghamton, New York. Those are the things I do know for sure. I also know that those versions of the remixes on the album are still the ones that kind of sit in my head when I hear, and listening to the album, that the material comes off. It's like, oh, that's, not the one that is kind of engraved on what remains of my brain. So when I listen to Double Platinum on its own, it's like, okay, this all feels how it's supposed to be. This is a natural listening experience for me. So it's one of those weird things. And I mean, come on, cassettes were shit. But I bought the LP when I started collecting, and I got rid of it because I saw that there was a shiny cover version of Double Platinum that had platinum center rings, and the one I had annoying black text, which we now know is the 85 reissue non-gatefold. So I binned that and replaced it with a 78 copy, which there you go figure. My early collecting was definitely teetering on toddler legs. Learned a lot. So let's talk about some of the songs that are on this. I mean, obviously when you get into the album itself, you start off with Strutter 78, which is a completely pointless redo. Let's get that one out of the way immediately. Should it have been on there, or should there have been a new song? And knowing what you know of the demos that, say, circulate these days from around the era, what would be the one, if you would replace it, or other song that you would re-record? Or do you think Strutter 78 is fantastic, re-recorded, Mark?
I don't know. I don't think it's horrible. It is kind of pointless. I mean, the only thing that really changed on it is they just give it a more of a sort of disco beat, and just some little guitar lines got added here and there. But other than that, it's nothing really to write home about. And I think they just did that so that he can claim to have a single to release from the album. Now, as far as other songs that could be on there, I mean, there was all kinds of things that I used to read about. I'm not as connected into the whole scene with the unreleased stuff as maybe some of you guys are, but I remember in one of the books they were saying that they were talking about that Queen for a Day song, that they said that appeared somewhere on a reel somewhere when they got sent over to do the work for this album, and they said that, obviously they weren't going to put that on there, but that was the only song that kind of comes to mind as a not released song that maybe they could have used, I guess, if they really, really wanted to. But I like the songs that are on Double Platinum. The only thing that I think is pointless on there is Strutter 78. So apart from that, I think everything else on there is good. I mean, obviously the Rock Bottom intro is kind of, useless as well in there too. But I think the rest of it is good. And just like you, Julian, I think a lot of the mixes on this album are the ones that I enjoy more, like Calling Dr. Love. I think that version on this album is much better than the one on Rock and Roll Over. I like it a lot better.
Yeah, and of course the stuff from Hotter Than Hell sounds pretty damn good on Double Platinum, doesn't it? Lonnie, what about you? Strutter 78, yay or nay, or would you replace it?
I can take it or leave it. It's fine. Obviously, it's not my favorite version of the song. And actually, the single that appears on like that single box set is even drastically different than even what appears on Double Platinum. That was actually one of the bigger surprises of that singles box set a few years ago. But I could really take it or leave it. I mean, why remix that song really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Personally, I'd rather see them do something like they did with Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, going back to that, and putting on a couple of new songs, like maybe Reputation, clean that up and put it on there, or Smoke, clean that up and put it on there, something like that. I think that could have been more fun than just a remix of a song that already appears on the first album, that already appears on Kiss Alive, and you're putting out again on a third album in basically 4 years that appears on three Kiss albums in 4 years. It it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I would have done something different with some new songs personally.
Yeah, and since you said Reputation, thank you very much. I looked at some of the stuff that they kind of peg at that era, and that was one of the ones. Plus, the other song that was mentioned in the Kiss Army newsletter that fans who were members of the Kiss Army would have been aware of, if they'd been in the Love Gun era, Sincerely, which they did mention that kind of, I can't remember which issue off the top of my head, so don't bust my balls, people. So, Ken, what about you?
Yeah, Strutter 78, I didn't care for it too much when I first heard it. That was probably
We got a drum beat
very
going.
very first very first time I did hear it. Was that in time? But anyway. So I agree with Lonnie about the single version. I like the single version much better. But having said that, I don't think they needed to put it there. Either put the studio version of Strutter there, or what's missing from here seems to be Shout It Out Loud.
Yeah.
Is not on here. So why not put that there instead of the Strutter 78? That's what I would do.
Or I Stole Your Love.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of better choices than that re-record. It's like everyone else said, it was pretty pointless to do. I guess they're just trying to say, oh, it's a new song. But if you're gonna do a new song from that standpoint, do a new song, not a re-record of one of your songs.
I think as far as Strutter goes, at least it had been a single. I did the numbers on this, and my biggest problem with the album is its balance. It's completely unbalanced in terms of the material. Just for example, Simmons Stanley compositions, there are 4. Primary Simmons compositions, 3. Primary Frelly compositions, 2. Chris, 1. Stanley, 11. In terms of the balance, it's a little bit skewed for me. Where is the stuff like Watching You, or when you look at some
Shock Me.
Yeah, Shock Me is probably the biggest.
That's a big one,
and most egregious, candidate that's missing. And what was it used? It was used as the B-side again on the Strutter 78 single. So, what are some of the most egregious songs that you think are missing from this, Ken?
Well, like I said, Shout It Out Loud. I know Mark mentioned I Stole Your Love, which is a pretty darn good one. I also was thinking, what was the other one I was thinking of now? Is Making Love on here? Oh, yeah, it is on here. Never mind. It is on here, so I just forgot it was there. But, songs like that, it's actually a pretty good selection, but I think, the biggest one for me was Shout It Out Loud. And like you said, Shock Me. Ace just, I guess they didn't want to put too much Love Gun maybe on here. That's why Shock Me's not on there, and I Stole Your Love is not on there. It's too new, and they wanted people to buy more of Love Gun.
The title track's the only one on there.
Yeah.
Lonnie, what about you? What sort of songs do you think should be kind of there in place of what is there?
In a greatest hits package, Christine 16 was a single, and I get it. We were just saying, I get it why there's not a lot of Love Gun represented on there. Love Gun's less than a year old when this album came out, and they probably thought, well, that's going to curtail any potential sales of Love Gun if we put out the greatest hits of Love Gun on a new greatest hits package. We might be shooting ourselves in the foot. But I think, so I get it at the time, but then going back and like for us the 3 of us who rediscovered this era of the band, you take a look at it for itself and go, well, this isn't the greatest hits of the first 6 albums. They're, we're recalling, Shout It Out Loud. Where's Shout It Out Loud? Where's I Stole Your Love? Where's Christine 16? Where's Shock Me? Why is there so much more from certain albums and not enough from others? So I get it. I understand why it is the way it is, but there's a lot off that first album on there. I mean, Strutter, Deuce, 100,000 Years, Cold Gin, Black Diamond. I mean, there's 5 songs off the first album alone, and 1 song off of Love Gun, and there's 1, 2. Is there only 2 off of Hotter Than Hell?
Yep, the single,
so,
basically.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really loaded with certain albums and not with others. So, but why 5 songs off the first album and then 2 off the second? Because, like Julian said, where's Watching You? How about that? And yeah, it was on Alive, but all of these songs were on Alive or Alive 2 as well. So I think it's interesting the way they put it together, and I think at the time it makes sense, but when you're backtracking the catalog, it raises some questions. But I understand why they did it the way they did.
Maybe they were being cautious about it, because if you go out and put more of Hotter Than Hell stuff on there, especially since it sounds so much better, they hear that on there and go, oh, this sounds great. They go buy Hotter Than Hell and they go, ooh, what the hell happened?
Sounds like,
it could sound like crap, like compared to the double platinum. Personally, for me, I think that I agree with Julian. They should have balanced it out a bit more. Maybe even put more songs on there with Peter singing. Like, why didn't they put maybe like Nothing to Lose on there with Peter doing, his backup singing there in the chorus? Or why didn't they put something, this is a bad example, but Getaway, for example, with something he's singing, or Strange Ways or something with Peter on there representing him? Because while Ace didn't really do any singing except Shock Me, Peter had done singing on quite a bit of the songs, right? So why not have him represented on there? He really didn't. He just did Beth. That's it, right? So I think that's one thing that's kind of missing as well, right? There were, if you really want to look at it, there are songs that we just mentioned already. Lonnie mentioned Christine 16 is not on there. That's a big song that should have been on there. If you're going to look at this as a greatest hits sort of example, right? I still think Strange Ways is a great song that should have maybe been put on there. That could have been put on there instead of something like 100,000 Years or something, because I mean that song is not exactly the high point of the first record, even though the live version is. But that's the live version, right? And there's so many different things that they could have did. Watching You is a song that is definitely missing, because it's a great song. I mean, my favorite version of it still has to be the Eddie Kramer demo version of it that they did early on. I love that version of it. But again, maybe they didn't do it because they would have cleaned it up, put it on here. It would have sounded a lot better, and then people go running for Hotter Than Hell, and they're like, ugh, So I think that's maybe why they stayed away from that, and why they loaded so much on the first record, because the first record, it sounds a lot better than the second one. I mean, I think it does.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I kind of thought about when looking at this album. 6 songs off the first album: Strutter, Firehouse, Deuce, 100,000 Years, Cold Gin, Black Diamond. I'm like, that's just way too much from one album, taking away spots basically for another album. So I pruned it down. I say, okay, Strutter and Deuce. Personal preferences. I mean, the two kind of go together anyway. Nothing to Lose, first single, and then B-side to Kissin' Time. It should have been on there, and it's a Peter vocal. And then Firehouse, because of the TV stuff that, where that's performed. So it all makes sense from that. Double platinum, no matter what, they called it a commemorative celebrating, but it's still going to be an entry point for many people at that time. It's going to be the first album. You want it to kind of draw people to your catalog, as well as celebrating the band. So when we get to Hotter Than Hell, I'm going with Hotter Than Hell, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. I actually went with Got to Choose over Watching You. Just again, because if this is going to be the Paul Stanley double platinum album, it's going to be Got to Choose rather than Watching You. Dressed to Kill, again. I mean, there's technically 4 songs, 3.5, call that Rock Bottom intro. She is just dirge-like, and I don't think is a good kind of advertisement. So I replaced that with Getaway, which you've already mentioned. Because again, it was the B-side to both of the singles released off that album. I mean, it's okay as it is. Let's be very clear. It's just like when you start thinking about you're trying to sell it. Shout It Out Loud is another one. That even as much as I'm not a fan of that song, and it's on my list, as is one other one, Take Me. Which Making Love. No, Take Me. a B-side, again, Making Love was nothing, or Mr. Speed. Wasn't that a B-side on one of the singles? So, there's so much more that they could have done with it. Packaging, I mean, Ken, you're the only one who was contemporaneously in the same room in the same year as this album being released. What did you think of the packaging? Was it did you think it was like the coolest thing you'd ever seen, or? Yeah,
I thought it was pretty darn cool. I mean, with the reflective, what they should have put as part of the hype sticker, if there was a hype, it just said, it's great for tanning too. I mean, you can go like this, you're out in the sun, do the reflecting thing.
Well, you'd have all the Stellas doing that,
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I thought, this is very. No other album. I think there's only a couple albums that had been released that had the silver type foil thing. I know Bad Company did. I think I want to say Grand Funk might have done one. Maybe they did gold. But anyway, it's not a common thing. And I'm sure it costs a little bit more money to do this. But theirs was, the Kiss one was, it's just super shiny. And then the other packaging part of it is the embossing on the inside. And I see where, like Mark said, you've got in there, you're trying to trace to see what they really look like without makeup kind of thing. But I think we probably did it. It's like, no, this doesn't work. The other part is, I guess I would have rather have had, instead of the plain white sleeves, something else, like lyrics or something like that. They didn't have any of that. They're just the plain white sleeves. It did have, of course, the little award deal that came with it. I think I mentioned this in another podcast that they should have made it a flexi disc kind of thing. And maybe if they were going to put Strutter 78, put that on like a flexi disc.
That's
you
a good.
Put on your
turntable
like and play that. Play it that way. And then you can, on the actual vinyl, you can put a real Shout It Out Loud or whatever, something that's really missing.
Interesting.
So, but can't go wrong. I've always loved this album, and I guess the key factor is it's just the mirror kind of shininess to it is just very very cool.
So, what do you guys think of your collections? What is your kind of favorite or go-to copy in your collection, and what is the one that you would love to add into your collection? Me, it's easy because I only have one copy of my collection at the moment, and that's the Kisteria version, and that'll probably be the only copy I have because I never seem to be able to get my hands on the legendary Australian white cover, and it's just going for stupid money now. So, Lonnie, what about?
I got an original one I bought back in probably reunion tour era, so I've had it for over 20 years. It's nice. It has all the inserts and everything. It's my go-to for it. If I'm at home, if I'm not in the car or whatever. Obviously, I have it on my phone if I'm in the car. But I don't know if I have another go-to I really need for it though. To be perfectly honest with you, it's a great album. Don't get me wrong. The Australian one, the white Australian one would be nice, but I just don't have. I have to justify things, and I can't justify that. So
that is not going to work
for the PC answer.
Mark.
Well, I have I have a couple of versions, but I have a standard Canadian release version of it. I have the one that's my main one that I like listening to is my US promo copy version. I think that sounds really good. It's a nice version of that. The one I'd like to get is either a Japanese pressing version of it, or the one I would really like to get actually is I'd like to get the UK one that had the alternate pictures inside there. I think there was the Dynasty pictures. I think they used in there. I'd like to get that one. I'm mainly because I like the change, having something different inside the gatefold as opposed to having just the standard one that you have all the time. I mean, essentially the music is the same. There's nothing changed on it. The Japanese pressing may just sound better because it's better quality vinyl and it's not as noisy. So that would be maybe an audiophile version of why to get that version of it. But, you know, and I'm going to be very careful how I tread this little sentence here, but you wouldn't catch me dead buying that Australian pressing, as I said, and almost got myself launched out of a particular Facebook group for saying this, that only a fool would pay that much money just to have a different cover, you know, just to get a different cover pressing, you know.
How
that record,
dare you?
That's all you're paying, the $2,000 or whatever the crazy amount that they're paying for that record, for that album. I mean, really, all it is just, and it's not even a proper version of it. It was just someone that they decided to make because they couldn't get the proper ones like this. So they just decided now all of a sudden that this one is so valuable. I mean, it's really a B version of the cover, but yet it's so collectible, you know. I mean, okay, I'm going to stop.
Yeah, might be a good idea. You might get banned.
Yeah.
So the ones, Mark, the one with the from UK with the different inner, I do have that one.
Oh, nice.
But my, I guess my favorite is, I don't know what the go-to is. I have the promo one. I have my original, and the Casteria one, which I don't think I've opened up yet. I don't think I've pulled, you know. I mean, I know that one is a rare. There should be 1,000 copies of that. But you know what? I might open that one tomorrow.
Ooh.
And play it so I can hear the difference. Since it's all remastered, I'm thinking it might sound pretty darn good. So I might do that. I guess that would, or if it sounds good, that would probably be my go-to.
Yeah, I think collecting-wise, I got rid of everything. I got rid of my British one, which was the alternate blue cover inside. I had this great Japanese one, and I bought it cheaply, I think, on eBay, and it arrived, and it had the unused hype sticker that went on the outside with the track listing and all the details. It had a survey postcard. It had the poster. Had the lyric. Had everything, and more. So it was a super duper copy. Of course, I sold it because once I've had it in my hands, I'm done. You know, it's like, okay, next. I just, it's like to have the hunt.
Yeah,
You know, is what it's about for me, rather than, you know, building up boxes and boxes and boxes of Kiss stuff in an apartment. I mean, my wife hates me enough anyway for all the Kiss shit I have around. But, you know, if I had shelves full of LPs that, you know, when an earthquake hits and they all fall down on her, I mean, if she survived that, I would be a dead man. So, all right. Any final thoughts on Double Platinum? I do have just one quick one, and that is internal documentation at Casablanca suggests it had shipped 1.3 million copies by June 79. Add to that the 522,000 that it scanned in the sound scanner. So that's 1991 to March 2012 was the last time we got any figures. And that puts it over 1.8 million by then. So I think it's pretty clear that Double Platinum is indeed Double Platinum.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Took a while, but it made it.
All right, let's go to... Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it was funny that initially that was one of the comments that a lot of people started making about that record, is that they had, people are saying the gall to call it Double Platinum when it didn't even sell that much. But I guess now they can say it no problem now. 40 years later, it's definitely shipped 2 million copies, because a lot of those Casablanca numbers in the early days were creative mafia math, shall we say. All right, let's go to a topic on the board for discussion. And this one jumped out at me today, and it was, would Eddie Kramer have made the production of Kiss's albums in the 1980s better? Mark, would Bob Ezrin's production have made?
Well, it depends on albums, right? So.
Yeah, I say start with Animalize.
Okay,
you know, and go from there, because I don't think anyone's going to diss Michael James Jackson and the work done on both of those albums. So
yeah. Well, with that said, I think that my first impulse is to say yes, because Eddie Kramer has done a lot of really great records. I mean, I have a Spotify account. Yeah, it's not the,
No.
nothing to write home about, but on it they have a little thing where every once in a while they make these specialty playlists. And one time they had an Eddie Kramer playlist where they had a whole slew of material that he had produced over the years, that Hendrix and all kinds of different stuff. And you gotta hand it to him. He's a fantastic engineer. He has a good ear, and a lot of the records that he's been doing are the ones that I enjoy the most. Rock and Roll Over is a prime example. And later on, he did work with Ace on some of his records later on, and while they're maybe not the best written songwriting wise, you can't knock the sound quality of them. They sound really good. The production of it was good. Whether it sounds dated, that also has to do with the artist too. Maybe the artist wants to sound that way. Maybe they want that gated snare, or they want this or that, or they want some odd flanger sound that only came out in the 1980s. But I think as a whole, I think that Eddie Kramer really is a benefit to any band that he was working with. So I think that Animalize would have been much better, I think, with him behind it, because I think Paul would have been able to more focus on the writing side, his performing, his singing, and not have to worry about the production, because it is a lot of work to do that as well as everything else. Producer's job is not the easiest job to have. So if you take that away and give it to Eddie Kramer and he puts his magic on it, could you imagine how much better Animalize could have been?
Precisely. Lonnie?
I don't know. I think the 80s albums.
What do you mean you don't know?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if having Eddie Kramer come in and produce those albums would have made them better. Sure, I think it could have made them better. But I think that the sound that is translated on Animalize and on Asylum and on Crazy Nights is the sound that they wanted. It is the sound that was trendy at the time. You can look back at it and say, well, these albums don't sound as good as Creatures of the Night, or they don't sound as good as Lick It Up. Well, Michael James Jackson produced those and Paul Stanley produced these others, so that's why. Well, you know what? Kiss also looked a little different in those years. And if you look at it with blinders on and look at Kiss on the Asylum tour and go, why do they look like that? Well, you're missing the fact that every other band that was popular at the time was dressing almost the same way. And Kiss was looking for an image, and that's the image that they wanted. And I think they were looking for a sound, and that's the sound that they wanted, was a sound that was trendy at the time, for starting with Animalize in 84. So could Eddie Kramer have made them better? Yeah, I think he could have made them better. He could have made them sound better to us in 2018. But I don't think they would have resonated better in 1984, if that makes any sense.
Which album would he have best benefited then? I mean, I kind of go between Animalize is probably a somewhat poor sounding album, as is Hot in the Shade. Crazy Nights is exactly, again, what they wanted, so I don't really even figure that there's much to be done there, because it would change the dynamic so much. Asylum is perfection sonically for me, so it's a hard, crunchy rock album, so take it or leave it. Again, it's so subjective. I just think that Eddie Kramer, this whole thing, and I think I chimed in on the thread, was that I don't think that Frelly's Comet is a particularly good sounding album. I think it's perfectly adequate. It's not spectacular. He did not hit the same ball out of the park that he had with the 78 album. Obviously, the material is not on the same caliber as the 1978 solo album material, but it's got some. We Got Your Rock is a great song. Calling to You is a great song. Rock Soldiers is a great song. Breakout. So it does have some really strong material, but it's lacking any kind of seasoning. It's just very matter of fact, one form for me, one note, whatever. I don't know how to really explain it. It's just kind of bland, tasteless, lack seasoning. So that's why I don't think he could help them. Again, like Lonnie said, they knew a sound that they wanted for, most of those albums. Ken? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, Animalize. Geez, that's Paul's actually second attempt at producing, because I think he did New England, his first album, didn't he?
Yeah.
But here's where I think the producer of Eddie Kramer would have benefited. Not necessarily the sound. I think the song selection. He may have had some influence where where he would have allowed certain Gene songs on there over the other Gene turds that ended up on the end of Animalize. That's where the Paul Stanley factor comes in, where I don't like that song, Gene. Sorry. Oh, I like that one, While the City Sleeps. That's a great song. Let's put that on there. So I think
Murder in High Heels? Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Eddie Kramer would have said, no, Gene, this is either it's not stuff or it's not finished. So, what else you got? They go, oh, I got the Juliet, or and these other things or whatever. So I think they would have been better, at least from the song standpoint itself, not necessarily worried about the sound itself, but the actual songs that ended up on the records.
Could you imagine a world without Burn Bitch Burn? Wow.
Very, very, very easily. I mean,
you wouldn't have it. It wouldn't exist anymore, because you would have gotten it on the vault anyway. So it wouldn't exist anymore.
It would have been the demo.
It just would have been a longer world, a longer time frame without Burn Bitch Burn. You'd have it now.
I was writing some shit about
it. Or at least Ken and Julian would have it now. How about that?
Oh yeah, we would get to hear, and that's
you guys would get to enjoy it.
Yeah, and we'd tell you all about it in small words as well. There was one of the things in the vault I was actually reading yesterday, the Lonely is the Hunter.
Oh yeah, Lonely is the Hunter. Yeah.
The snarky comments from Gene about Paul's production of Animalize, ruining. Basically, he said Paul ruined my song. Yeah, he ruined Lonely is the Hunter. Yeah,
that's hard to do.
Yeah. Eddie Kramer isn't going to save Lonely as the Hunter either, so...
Correct. Yes.
Bob Ezrin. Now, I think he could...
Now, there's a guy with some vision.
He could have saved Animalize, because none of those songs would be on the album. Right, Mark?
God.
And there would be an orchestra, and there would be
a
bassoon.
And kids.
Yeah, we'd have kids singing along with Burn Bitch Burn. And maybe some strings behind us. Yeah.
Canastas.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Well, it should have been different. It should have been Burn Witch Burn. That might have worked better.
That's what it was. I said this the other day. I don't know if it was on this podcast.
Was it really?
The original title was Burn Witch Burn. So,
oh, really? Eh?
Yeah.
There you go.
I read that on the internet, so it must be true. So
it's gotta be true.
I think the only place that Eddie Kramer could have really helped out the band in the 1980s is right at the end with that abomination, Hot in the Shade, which just sounds like shit. I mean, because then it would have had no disrespect to, it's probably Pat Regan is the engineer on a lot of those tracks. It would have had a more studio quality engineer behind the board, whereas I think Pat or whoever was the engineer behind the board was really taking them strictly as a demo, so that quality didn't matter as much, whereas someone that is in their blood, like Eddie, I don't think he's going to allow a demo. I mean, listen to his 73 demos versus the album versions. I think that makes the case that imagine those songs being treated in a similar manner to the 73 demos.
But that's it exactly, because I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, even his demos sound better than that album, right? So how could he not have a positive influence on the record? Because if he went in with that mentality to say, okay, guys, we're going to go in and just do a demo the old school way, because he just recently talked about this on Eddie Trunk when you were talking about
Jesus
this stuff.
Yeah.
Remember
And
that
drummer
whole
on
hoopla that started?
Yeah, larger than life. What? How many fucking pages is that thread now?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, it's only 7.
I knew it though.
Yeah,
I believe him that Anton played on Rocket Ride because
He
that is
couldn't.
not
They didn't
Peter
know
Criss
him.
drumming.
He didn't know him. He is not in the picture at all. The timeline is known for Anton. It is not Anton. There is no way it is Anton. No one knew him until early 78 or late 77 at the very earliest, when Ace was putting together his band. And then it was only an accident that he ever came into contact with Anton. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some... it's more like a sword coming out of the lake. That Anton comes into the picture way too late to have had anything to do with what was done in the studio.
It's like Eddie Trunk was leading the Witness. which was Eddie Kramer.
I think Eddie Kramer is absolutely correct that there's a possibility that he remembers someone else drumming, whether he was doing demo sessions with Gene and say the larger than life demo. I would not be surprised in the slightest that half the shit Gene takes the credit for drumming for on that album is Joe X from Stars. Mm. He's the name that has always been thrown around that I've heard as being one of the ghost drummers. Now, Peter Criss, I am just not enough of a musician to be able to speak to those drums, but I never thought that there was anything in those drums. I've listened to those songs over and over again.
It doesn't sound like Anton to me.
No, it doesn't sound like Anton, and it's not,
But it doesn't sound like him because it's just way too technically good to be Peter Criss. So no offense to Peter Criss, but I mean, come on. I mean, the very first time I heard that, I thought right away that it wasn't him because it just doesn't sound like his style. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just I never bought it. I never thought that it was him.
So what you're saying is you're not going to go see Peter Criss when he's in Canada in June.
Because now he knows what you look like. Now you're known to him. This will get
bad.
bad.
Do you hate Peter Criss?
I don't hate Peter Criss. I'm just saying that his whole thing, like when you listen to him play throughout the albums, there's a lot of razzmatazz that's in some of these songs that he just doesn't do. Mm.
Yeah.
So it could be this guy that you're talking about. Who knows? And I trust your research in the sense that if you say that Anton is not in there, then I believe you, right?
See, now it seems like you're arguing with yourself because earlier you said you believe that it's Anton. Now you're saying you believe it's not Anton.
Well, I mean, if he has the evidence to prove it, then obviously then it can't be, right? But I'm saying to me, it just out of everything else, like look at Rocket in the USA, okay, for example. I think that could easily be Peter Criss drumming that. Okay? All American Man, that could be Peter Criss drumming it. But I'm telling you, it's those other ones, and even Larger Than Life, I think that could be Peter, too. It's the only one that I think that he doesn't have, that he didn't play on his Rocket Ride. It's the only one. And I know that as soon as I said that on the board, everyone's like, whoa, what are you talking about?
Someone had said on the board, I guess, that they would have, Gene or Paul would have definitely taken that chance to say, yeah, he didn't, Peter wasn't there and he couldn't drum like that, so he wasn't gonna,
Exactly.
we got so-and-so the drum because Peter couldn't, wasn't up to snuff. So, but they haven't done that. Gene always says that it is Peter. So
when have they pulled any punches again, at Peter Criss and said, I'll take this jab at Peter.
Any opportunity.
I'm not going to take that jab at Peter.
Yeah.
Well,
that tells me it is. That tells me it is.
Okay, but when did they ever? Okay, I don't know this. Is why I'm actually literally asking this. When did they actually confirm that Anton played on Dynasty or on Mass? Did they actually come out and say it? Those guys, or was that something that was discovered and then they admitted to it?
That was years and years later. I mean, Anton didn't talk about it.
The remasters is the time that it kind of really
that they admitted it.
There were rumors,
Yeah.
and you know, I remember the rumors. You know, as
Yeah.
you know, early on as a fan, I mean, it was, you know, Richie Fontana's name was thrown around as well, as drumming on that album, which obviously, you know, he has. And you know, there was a time that Anton had a message board, you know, early 2000s, and he still wouldn't talk about it. You know, he wouldn't specifically confirm or deny anything about it. So, you know, here's one thing that I do wonder with Gene and Paul, and I totally agree with what Lonnie said. When have they missed an opportunity to throw Peter Criss under the bus in recent decades, since Peter left the band for the final time? They haven't. They've taken every opportunity they can to, you know, kind of denigrate him and kind of erase the importance of his contributions to the band. But what if they had nefariously replaced him? Say, done the drum tracks, he thought he did a great job, went home, they stayed in the studio. Hey, Joe, come over here. Here's $50.
Yeah, because
Your
like
take
that.
on.
Like that's never happened before. I mean, that was one of the things I also talked about on there too. Like lots of bands have done the ghost session stuff, right? I mean, Scorpions were a prime example of it as well. Blackout. That's not Herman Rarebell on drums doing that. Neither is it that other guy in bass. And Bobby Rondinelli said it himself that he drummed on that. So, you know, he's not credited anywhere. But, you know, that's the thing, because the unity of the group is more important, right? That's what they're trying to portray,
Mac
right?
Finn, for sure, yeah.
Now, I want to go to one more topic on the board today, and keep this show nice and concise. Well, it's hardly concise with four different things we talked about. But one thing that jumped out at me is that thread, Gene becomes a spokesman for a weed company.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that is Invictus appointing Gene. What do they call him? Jesus. The Chief Evangelist Officer. Jesus.
Chief Media Mogul Gene Simmons as Chief Evangelist Officer.
Yeah, and Gene
Must
Simmons.
be the medical.
Gosh, yeah.
It is. It's Health Canada's access to cannabis for medical purposes, the FDA and narcotics control regulations. You know, Gene Simmons is a branding and merchandising genius who not only created one of the most iconic bands of all time, but has spent decades building successful brands internationally in various industries and putting down anyone who has anything to do with drugs. Wait, no, they missed that part apparently.
Yeah,
Gene will lead marketing initiatives that will help spread the positive messages that dwell at the heart of Invictus in accordance with the strict regulations of all those. What do you think? Is that like the highest point of hypocrisy, or is anything for a buck okay in this context? Kiss does obviously sell ashtrays and wine and beer and many things that Gene has said are bad for you and that you're a loser for doing. Is weed any different, especially in the medical field? Is this just Gene being Gene? Ken?
Nah.
Well, one of the first things I thought is like, oh, anything, you know, he's going to get. I said they're paying him. You know, that's the key thing there. But I thought, well, it's got to, the medical marijuana. It's the only way he would buy into anything like that, to have his name associated with, I think, that. I wouldn't think he would have his name associated with the recreational outlet for it at all. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense. I can't see him doing that. So it's kind of a stretch for him. It's kind of weird.
You know, but this is stupid though, because they're saying medical marijuana, and we all know what's really going on here, okay? Because here in Canada, when Trudeau said that he was legalizing it here, like nationwide, for us to have marijuana being legal, I mean, I could literally hear the wine bottles popping, the corks popping everywhere down the street, and people celebrating, and yay, finally, And I can see the grocery store owners all celebrating that they're going to be selling potato chips by the dozens as soon as that becomes legal here in Canada. You know,
we need more Cheetos.
Yeah, they're gonna go. Their stocks are gonna go through the roof as soon as that happens here in Canada. Because even at my doctor's office, there are so many people there who are saying that, hey, you know, before they were thinking of all kinds of reasons to get medical marijuana prescribed to them, but now that there's going to be no need for it because it's just going to be legal anyways, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need medical marijuana. So what's the, you know, and Gene before was saying, and I remember in the whole commentary section on one of these Kissology things, they're saying drugs are the thing that is going to destroy our nation, and he went on and on about it during the, you know, when they were showing the farewell tour footage. But now all of a sudden he's, you know, he's supporting it and he's a spokesperson for it now. So what happened? You know, they should rewind that footage and play it back to him a couple thousand times and see if he remembers saying that, because now, you know, hey, everybody's saying before, weed is the gateway drug to other things, cocaine and everything else. So if you're supporting that, then, well, you know.
It was a gateway drug for every fucking person I knew who used it in high school. Every single person who touched it went on to something else, up the food chain, shall we say, without going into any further details. So I have a problem with him doing, you know, it's legal in California. I can't walk down the goddamn street without someone toking up and inflicting it. They do shit with weed here that you can't get away doing with fags. I mean, with cigarettes. Excuse me. Slipped into English there for a minute.
Careful.
Yeah, especially in San Francisco. That's a hell of a slip of the tongue to make.
That's it, that boy.
But here, you know, you've got the anti-smoking signs. You got to be 25 feet away from the entrance to a building. I actually keep buckets of boiling oil. If anyone smokes outside my apartment window, I go all 11th century on them. Off goes the boiling oil. You know,
damn, Gina.
You know, there's nothing. I'm a reformed smoker. I quit 12 years ago, so I hate cigarette smoke. And people have been reasonably good since all these bans came into effect, and about where they smoke and where they afflict it. Yeah. Weed, on the other hand, you've got this stupid 420 bullshit that, you know, what, Hitler's birthday toke up. They've been doing it in Golden Gate Park for years, where you're not even allowed to smoke in Golden Gate Park, but it's okay and has been for many years. Everyone goes there and gets stoned on 420, and the police just, I guess, get contact high and smile and don't shoot anyone. Meanwhile, Golden Gate Park, they'll kick children out of the park, you know, for playing
skateboarding.
Yeah, for skateboarding or playing soccer wearing cleats, little 40-pound kids. But they'll let the stoners toke up because it's weed, and the Haight-Ashbury's, you know, right there. So Gene getting involved in this, even though it's right now under the guise of medical, I don't like it. But you know what? In terms of hypocrisy, they've done the beer, they've done the wine, they've done the ashtray, exactly. So it's no fucking different than that. I just have a pet peeve against, I mean, come on. 2008, I went to Paso Robles, California State Fair to see Kiss. You know, had a great show, met Tim for the first time there, got to see face, makeup and manure, because it was the State Farm. And I actually got stoned, contact high, because of all the dope being smoked around me in that audience, that I could not drive home because I was impaired. I had to get a hotel. It freaking, you know, it really bugs the shit out of me. I don't happen to do that stuff now. Hey, when I was 15, I did lots of dumb shit, you know. So I don't like it being inflicted. And I don't think Gene really wants to be associated with how negative it's going to become in California. While it's been legalized for now, the taxes on it are just pushing it all underground again. Black market, because they are taxing the living shit out of it, thinking they're going to make money, and they're making it uneconomic for everyone. They're trying their damnedest to put minorities in as people who've been damaged by drug culture the most, to give them a leg up, but then they're shooting them in the feet. You know, it's nuts.
Well, you know, you're talking about, they've been there things, you know, him and Paul have the rock and brews, right? Yep. So it's just right there. I mean, they can do a rock and weed
cafe
spin-off or something, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It's all, to me, at this point, way a long time ago, you know, 20 years ago or whoever, it would have seemed like, no way, I can't believe he would do that. But now I can see it.
Yeah, so what's coming next? Kiss branded bowls, Kiss branded whippets, you know, Kiss branded syringes for your heroin junkie in your life who's a Kiss fan.
You know, it does seem, you know, there is the beer, there is the wine, there is the ashtrays, but it does seem like this crosses to a different entity than the beer and the wine and the ashtrays. And even the wine back in the day, I'm sure not all of it now, but like those original bottles of Kiss wine that came out during the reunion tour were actually non-alcoholic wine, if you guys remember. And I know there is it's non-alcoholic. I have a bottle, and of course I do. And, but I mean,
in other words, they were selling Kool-Aid.
Sure. Yeah, they're selling, you know, Kiss flavored Kool-Aid in a wine bottle. But now I understand that there's the beer there and there's other things too. But I don't know. And maybe you can blame it on the part of the country where I live. You can blame it on, you know, what was ever inflicted on me growing up, values that were, you know, inflicted on me growing up. But I think that the marijuana thing, even though it's medical marijuana, I think crosses the line into a different entity than the other items. But like Ken said, if he would have done this in 98, just say 20 years ago in 98, it would have been frowned upon much more than it is in 2018. Because it is legalized for medical purposes in certain states and legalized throughout the board in other states. So Am I okay with that? If they legalize weed in Missouri, am I going to go out and buy marijuana? No, I'm not going to go out and do that. That's not my thing. But I don't know. I still think it's crossing the line into another realm from what they had done previously, in my opinion. And you can get upset about it if you want, but that's my opinion.
I mean, I'm not one to hide my past. I mean, I was pretty open about it a lot earlier on in my episodes, and you know, I had trouble with a lot of stuff before, whether it was marijuana, cocaine, and stuff like that before, but that's all kicked, opiates and stuff like that, and that's done with me. And I don't have any problem with people smoking pot. I don't do it. I used to do it before too, but, you know, to me, a toke here and there doesn't really bother me, but what does bother me about this is that if they agree with this, you know, and they legalize it, will it stop there? Because, I mean, I think about places like Switzerland and stuff like that. When I was younger, I went there, and over there they had, like, everything was legalized. They had, like, a park there where they had, like, there was a fountain in this park, and people were cleaning out their needles in this park and shooting heroin, you know? Yeah. And they legalized everything. And when I talked to some of the people there when I was younger, some of their mentality toward it was that I forget what this is called. Is it Darwinism, where they say that let them do it and then just get rid of all the stupid people theory, where they said, okay, if you're stupid enough to do it, let them kill themselves and that's the end of it, right?
Right.
So, but I mean, you know, sometimes people get hooked on this stuff, you know, and get onto it from a means that they didn't mean to get on that way. You know, like some people have bad backs, or they have a hip injury or the surgery, and they get onto these opiates, and then they have a hard time getting off of it. That's what happened with me. My back is totally shot. I have like psoriasis in the part of my spine, and I got onto opiates because of that. And then it was a bitch getting off of it. And I'm telling you, I don't wish that on anyone getting off of it, because there was a lot of puking, a lot of bad stuff trying to get off of it, you know? Right. And that's the thing. Not everybody who gets hooked on this stuff did it because they wanted to party, dude, and wanted to get hooked on and, you know, do that kind of stuff. So I think there has to be a line kind of drawn with that. It's not everybody who's doing it is just a moronic idiot. Sometimes it just happens that way, that they got onto it because of medical reasons, right? But, you know, that's what I'm just worried about, is that if they're going to legalize marijuana here, I hope they just leave it at that, and they don't say, okay, well, now, you know, let's just do everything legal, and then, you know, I'm not sure what the mentality was in Switzerland, why they did it that way. I don't know enough about that history, about why they legalized everything at that point, but I really hope it doesn't go that far here.
And that's what San Francisco is doing right now. Safe shoot-up zones.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake. It just, I totally get that there are plenty of people who use marijuana to alleviate symptoms of anxiety, of MS. I know there is a medical use for it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I know there's also, what is the difference recreationally between that and beer? Come on, it grows naturally. It's not like it's a Coke or something that needs to be refined or distilled like whiskey. I mean, come on, more effort goes into making whiskey than growing bud. So, it's a tough thing. It just seems to really go against everything that Gene says. And maybe his role is, yet to be defined. And we're instantaneously associating Simmons' dope goes against everything that he says, and without really reading the context of everything that's in this press release as the chief evangelist. I think mainly it sounds more like, again, they're going to use his visibility. To bring awareness to what they're trying to do. I don't think he would bother to get involved in anything that does go against his mantra. Yeah. I just don't see Gene selling himself out. I know he'll sell a lot of things, but I think there is a line that he won't cross, without a doubt.
So maybe let's wait and see on this.
I'm going to head off to the Rock and Brews now.
There you go.
All right. I think that's enough dope and strange topics. I mean, for those of you who are listening, what do you think about... I think the Peter Criss question is one of the most interesting ones that we kind of touched on today. Double platinum, awesome, 40. Going to spin it afterwards. Anyone know Joe? Let's get him on if he wants to come on this podcast or go on any other podcast. I'd love to talk to him about Stars or whatever. No, what band? Yeah, Stars, I think. I don't know. Fuck it. His music. And that question around particularly Gene's demos. I'd love to find out more about that from people who know. So if you know stuff and want to share it, chime in on wherever you listen to this show, where we've got a thread going. Say, hey, I know this, I've heard that. Let's hear the rumors that you've heard about these mystery drummers on the Alive 2-track. Let's hear your point of view on the Anton question. Can you put something into the timeline that you can document about him knowing the band in time to have recorded? I don't think you can, but I love being wrong. That's just how we learn shit, so anything's possible. So that's a whole bunch of topics today. For now, from Mark, from Lonnie, Ken, and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final, there are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.